Good morning. How you guys doing? Good. It's good to see you guys, and excited to be with you all today. If you're a guest with us today, welcome to One Church. I hope you enjoy your experience with us today, and if you're back, welcome back. So I was going to ask a question today real quick. Did you ever have that friend, or maybe even currently have that friend or person in your life that just has a tendency to influence you in a bunch of different ways? Like maybe they were good things, maybe there's some not so good things they influenced you to do, but there is that person in your life, maybe it's now, maybe it's in your past, that they just had this influence on you to flip your world upside down. For me, his name is Dale Lippin. And so Dale has actually been my best friend since the 6th grade. And Dale moved on our block into a new house when we were in 6th grade together. And we just instantly became pretty much best friends. Now, before Dale, though, before he moved onto my block when we were in 6th grade, I was a really pretty well-behaved kid. I didn't go looking for trouble. I didn't go causing ruckus in my community or anything like that. I was a really well-behaved kid. You ask my mom, I was a pretty straight on the straight and narrow type kid. And then Dale came into my life, and everything flipped upside down. Now, just to be clear, we didn't become some rebellious kid who went down some wayward path and got in trouble with the law a bunch of times, things like that. However, Dale and I had this problem when we hung out, which was pretty much every day from like the 6th grade through graduating high school. The problem was we would get struck with the severe case of boredom. And when boredom hit Dale and I, that's when things started flipping upside down in our lives, where we would do things, and Dale's influence on my life let us do some really crazy stuff, like urban kayaking. Now, raise your hand. How many of you guys ever went urban kayaking before? Yeah, I didn't think so. So I'm about to explain to you what urban kayaking is, and just so you know, you teenagers in this room, I'm about to give you this idea of something to do. Don't do this, what I'm about to tell you, okay, without parental permission. Like, if your parents say go for it, then sure, go for it. But what I'm about to tell you right now, don't do it without parental permission. But urban kayaking, man, this is seriously one of the coolest things this planet has ever offered me in my life. And so what urban kayaking is when you take a kayak. You guys know a kayak? It's like the boat-looking thing. It's like usually a single person, but you get into it. You're kind of covered around you. And you use it for bodies of water, like down a river, down a creek, whatever you want to do. But urban kayaking is you take that kayak, but you don't use it in water. You use it in urban settings like stairs and hills and things like that. And so we found out about this idea of urban kayaking, and Dale and myself and some other good friends, we decided we wanted to experience urban kayaking to its fullest. And so we got a hold of this old kayak, and we started searching around my hometown of Butler for where can we experience the best urban kayaking situation. And so we found in our local park, Butler Memorial Park in our hometown, it's built into all these hills, which means there are sets of stairs all throughout the park. We're like, this is the perfect place for us to urban kayak. And so we haul this kayak to this park, and we get there, and we kind of send it down a couple of like small stairs to kind of see what's going to happen and go with that. But then the influence started. We saw bigger sets of stairs, and we start kind of challenging each other. And Dale comes to me and say, hey, Brandon, you need to do this set over here. And what this set was, it was a set of 7 stairs, a platform, and then 8 more stairs. And he's like, listen, man, this is your big one. Hit this one. What you'll probably do is you'll hit the 7, you'll glide gracefully across the platform, and then you'll hit the 8 stairs after that, and you'll land at the bottom, and everyone will cheer for you. Everyone's going to love you. Everyone's going to think you're brave, and all these different things. And so I can't back away from that because of influence in your life. That's what takes place. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And so I set up at the top of the stairs, the first 7, and I get in the kayak. I put my helmet on because safety first when you're urban kayaking, ladies and gentlemen, okay? I got the oar, which I don't know why we had the oar. It didn't do anything, but we had it because it made us feel authentic. And so I go down on this adventure. And I hit the first 7 stairs, and I hit way more speed than I anticipated. And when I hit that platform, I didn't gracefully glide across that platform. It acted as a catapult, actually. And I hit that platform, and I am here today alive, still able to use my body pretty much to the fullest to tell you that my kayak never touched the second 8 stairs. Seriously, I ramped the entire thing, came to a crashing halt afterwards. It was painful, it was glorious, it was amazing. And I looked up and said, okay, I've done that, now top that. And so the influence on my life from Dale was pretty amazing at that point, but we couldn't just leave it at that. It was Dale's turn now because we flipped each other's world upside down. So after I did that, we found a set of 26 stairs. And I'm like, Dale, this is your turn now, man. I did the whole catapulting and I launched myself over 8 stairs. It's your turn now. But the thing about the 26 stairs, it wasn't just a straight shot of 26 stairs. That'd been way too easy. About halfway through, it kind of takes a curve, and the idea is you have to kind of maneuver your way down the curve of it. And we still thought that was too easy, so we actually convinced Dale, me and the other buddies, like, listen, you can do the 26 stairs, but actually to really top Brandon, what you have to do is get completely inside the kayak. And so Dale couldn't back away from that. It's influence, it's challenging, the peer pressure. So he wiggles himself and wedges himself completely inside the kayak to where you can't see him if you're looking to the side, okay? Sounds like a really good idea. We're like 14 years old. We understand physics really well, obviously. And so we just tell him that we're going to aim the kayak perfectly down the stairs, kind of compensate for the curve. He'll get to the bottom. It'll be awesome. And so Dale trusts us, which was his really first mistake right there. And then so he's in the kayak, we line it up, and we send Dale down this glorious path. And so he goes down, but the problem was we just didn't know what we were doing. And Dale's kayak did not compensate for that curve at all. In fact, as the curve happened, the kayak kept going straight, shot down the hill, and picked up even more speed. And it finally came to a stop when it ran into a cinder block building. And so Dale hits that building, and we're like, oh my goodness, what just happened? We're running down the stairs, we're running down the hill thinking, is he okay? Is he alive? Is he dead? What's up with Dale? And he finally pulls himself out, looks at us, and spits the piece of tooth that broke off in his mouth at us. It was awesome. And it was one of the greatest memories of our childhood. But what it shows is influence is a big deal in your life. Influence takes place and things happen and you do stuff that maybe you wouldn't normally do, but because other people are in your life and you give them that influence, things change. And so that's still one of the greatest stories of my childhood. And I wanted to share it with you just to remind you that influence is a big deal. In fact, I called Dale this week. I'm like, dude, one church is hearing about urban kayaking. He's like, man, I'm so excited. And so Dale's infamy lives in that as well. But this is what influence does. It leads us, it changes us, it causes our lives to be flipped upside down. We've all had those friends that influence. We're that friend sometimes that influences others. And we've all had these people in our lives that changes the way we think, the way we act, the way we live. It flips our worlds upside down. And it's not just individuals either. In fact, it's our influence comes from other things like groups of people, or whether it be a political party or your favorite news channel or an organization or a sports team. You guys know Penn's game 3 of round 1 today, right? Most of Pittsburgh is going to be watching that game today because that's the influence that team has on us. And it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. But influence happens in all ways, shapes, and forms, people, organizations, news outlets. But it happens in our lives and it changes and impacts the way we live them. We are influenced and we influence others. And this is and should be especially true for those who are involved with following Jesus. And the question we have to raise this morning is this, is what impact should followers of Jesus have on the world? What impact should followers of Jesus have on this world? As we continue our series called Upside Down today, where we're looking at Jesus' most famous teaching called the Sermon on the Mount. And we're looking at this idea of influence and why it's so important for us when it comes to this idea of following Jesus or not. And what's important for us is whether you are here and you are a follower of Jesus, it's good for us to know this. And if you're here, you're still exploring, trying to figure out who Jesus is, this is good for you to hear and learn and explore too, because this is what it means when it comes to following Jesus and the impact that we should have on this world. Last week, we looked at the first thing in Jesus' most famous teaching, and that was something that was called the Beatitudes, these blessings and these values that followers of Jesus are called to uphold in our lives as we live them out. And there's these blessings attached to them. And if you happen to miss last week, that's completely okay. Just go to YouTube, look up One Church Pittsburgh, and our channel's on there, and we upload all of our messages each week. It's an easy way to catch up and keep track of what the series we're going through. And so we talked about that last week, and Jesus is speaking to this crowd on this kind of, outside of the city in this big area where people can sit and listen to hear him teach and talk. And he tells them that a life following him is a life lived differently. That the values his followers are called to live out are different. They're upside down from the values that the world calls us to live out. And these Beatitudes, these blessings, they describe the character of what a Christian should look like. So we went through that last week, and then Matthew continues recording Jesus' teaching, and he says this in Matthew 5, 13 through 16. Jesus teaches, you are the salt of the earth. But if a salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Then Jesus says, you are the light of the world, a town built on a hill that cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So right after Jesus lists these characteristics of what one of his followers should live out, he makes this statement. He looks at this crowd, and this crowd is mainly made up of poor Jewish people. People who are under the oppressed, powerful Roman government. People that wish they had their own Jewish kingdom back. People who didn't have much money. People who didn't have many resources. People who didn't really have any influence in that world. And Jesus tells them, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And Jesus listed these characteristics that were peaceful, submissive, and quiet, and then he tells them that in living that way, they would have this worldwide influence and impact. It's also important to note that when Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world, he wasn't talking just to one person. He wasn't just singling one person out. He was saying you as in the entire crowd. So if he was in Pittsburgh today, he wouldn't say, you are the salt of the earth, or you are the light of the world. He would say, yins are the light of the world, okay? He's talking plural here. He's talking to the crowd, and he's saying, you as this collective force, when you follow me, you are going to have this impact on this world that it's never seen before. And so Jesus is looking at them, and he's teaching this group, and he's telling them that they are going to change the world. Now, the group would have listened to that and kind of said, what? How? It was so out of the realm of thinking. There was no way that this group that Jesus is teaching and talking to and investing in, there's no way that they can have that type of influence on the world in their own mind. They're probably thinking, what difference can I make, this poor Jewish person without any resources, without any influence in this world? And to help them understand that Jesus uses two items that was found in every single household in that culture. Whether they were rich or whether they were poor, these households had these things to illustrate his point. And the first thing he says is this. He says, they are the salt of the earth. Now, for us today in our culture, that seems a little weird because we have our, container of salt at home or at the restaurant, things like that. And we'll put some of it on our food, on our French fries, on our steak, whatever. And we use salt and we use it to flavor things. It flavors our food, and sometimes we probably use it too much of it. And in fact, doctors will probably tell our culture use a little bit less salt in our culture, but not in Jesus' day, though. We have to remember that in his culture, in his day, there was no electricity, which means there was no refrigeration, which means there wasn't easy ways to keep food from spoiling except for salt. And salt was used on everything when it came to food to keep it, to preserve it, to keep it safe, so they could use their food at a later date. And so salt was used as this saving force for their food in that culture. It wasn't just meant to, flavor and savor their food. It was meant to save their food. It cleansed their food from rotting, and so salt was a big deal. But like I said, the deal with salt wasn't about savoring the food like we use it for today. It was about saving food. It's about saving, not savoring. And so when Jesus says that you are the salt of the world, he's telling this crowd that they are the influence, and their influence will be so impactful on this world, they would literally be a part of saving the world from dying and rotting and decay. That they are playing such a big role that they are part of saving the world. Jesus also says that they are the light of the world, a shining city on a hill that cannot be hidden. You see, the setting of Jesus' teaching here in this context, as Matthew's recording this, he was just outside the city, and the city was built up high on top of this mountain. And it's still there today. And when travelers would be walking in the dark, or they'd be traveling, and they wouldn't be able to see much, they'd be walking in the wilderness, so there was no civilization, they would start coming upon this city. And they would see the lights from the mountains, from the hills. And they wouldn't just see one light. They would see all the houses that are built up in the hill, and they'd see all these lights lit up, hundreds and hundreds of lights. And it would project this hope for them, knowing that they were close to civilization, they were close to home, they were close to safety, because it's not safe to be walking in the wilderness where there's no other civilization. So this light in these cities projected this hope. And Jesus is saying, you are the light of the world. That you will project this hope that when people are walking in darkness in their life, they're going to see you and they're going to experience that, and they're going to know that this is hope, and they're going to walk and run towards that. because they know there's hope in that light. So Jesus tells them that they are like this light shown like a beacon of hope to the people walking in darkness. And Jesus tells the crowd that they are the light. They are the ones who give that hope. And they're the ones, but by the way they live, and the acts and the ways they serve the people around them, they will give light to those around them. Jesus tells his followers, this big group of people, that their influence will have a great impact on the world. But he also gives them some stern warnings in this teaching. He warns them about salt losing its saltiness. Now that sounds kind of weird. Like, how does salt lose its saltiness? In fact, if I took a big bucket of salt and just left it on the stage right here, it would take over 300,000 years for the salt to start losing its main impact of keeping food preserved. It's going to last a really, really long time. So Jesus is saying, what good is salt if it loses its saltiness? But here's what he meant by that. And everyone in that culture would have known exactly what he's talking about. You see, in that day, in that culture, when pools of salt water would dry up, it would leave the salt and some other minerals behind. Now, the proper way to handle that is you would separate the minerals that aren't salt from the salt, and then you would collect all the salt and keep that pure salt by itself, and then you would sell that in the marketplace. And people would buy that. They would pack it on their food, on their meat, and so they would preserve their food. But savvy businessmen knew pretty quickly that if you just kind of brush it all up together, get some salt, get some of the white powder, which was other minerals, put it all together, and you put it on top of the bag, you put some fresh salt on top of the bag, they would sell people this 5-pound bag of salt saying, hey, this is salt, it's good for your food. People would come, they'd open the bag, they'd touch it, lick it, realize, oh, this is good salt because salt was on top. But underneath it was mixed in with all these other minerals, all this other stuff that had no use, and they would pack their food with that. The food would rot. It was useless. And all they could do at that point is they would throw their food away, and they would just throw that, messed up, that wasn't really salt, bag of whatever it was, and they just throw it outside. It was useless. And what Jesus is saying here, he's saying what happens when we mix our lives the way we're supposed to live when we're following Jesus with the way the world wants us to live. He says we're losing our saltiness there. We're just like this bag of salt that doesn't preserve, it doesn't save. And it's like us taking our light and we're hiding underneath of a basket so no one sees the light. And no one does that. No one lights a light in their house and then covers it up because it's useless then. Especially in that culture, light was meant to give light to the household so people can see where they're going. And Jesus is saying when we compromise the way we live, when we compromise our values from God's kingdom and the world's kingdom, we're going to lose our impact. We're not going to be salt. We're not going to be light. We just kind of mix it in with everything else. And that's a big deal of what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is warning that when we compromise a life following Jesus, we're still living out the values of the world. The light and the salt is a waste. We lose our influence. And so he says, listen, when you follow me, when you uphold these values, when you live out these characteristics, when you trust God on this, the influence you have on the world is going to save it and it's going to give it hope. But when you don't, it's kind of just a waste and you lose that influence. Fast forward to after Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, he ascends back to heaven. And right before he does that, he gives his disciples one more command. They are to go out and make more disciples, more followers of Jesus. Now, why in the world would anyone want to do that, though? Like, if Jesus was going to make disciples, wouldn't it make sense if Jesus just stays on this planet and just keeps teaching, keeps pulling miracles, and keeps, teaching and training more followers to follow him? Wouldn't it be better just to have Jesus here in the flesh? But Jesus knew that they would be better together after he left. He's saying hundreds of lights is better than one. Lots of salt is better than a little. And so instead of him being the main guy doing all the work, he says, nope, I've trained you, I've raised you up, I've equipped you. It's your turn to go do that. I'm going to send back to heaven, but never am I going to leave you. I'm going to be with you this whole time, guiding you, helping you in this journey. And so Jesus gives them that command. And these early followers of Jesus, the first church essentially right here, they have no resources. They have no plan of attack. They don't even know what to do here. In fact, after Jesus ascended to heaven, they just kind of stood there looking up like, huh? So long that the angels had to come down from heaven and say, guys, go do what you're supposed to do, leave, Jesus is gone. And so, the followers go back and they just do what they were taught to do. They followed Jesus and they lived out the values that he did, and they became the salt and light in this world. They started serving those around them. They started loving the people around them. They took care of the orphans and widows in their community. They gave to people who had need. They sold possessions so that they can give more resources away. And people started taking notice. They lived under the oppression of the Roman Empire. And in that culture, the value of children's lives were nothing. They didn't care about them. They only cared about the children that they viewed would grow up to be strong and actually serve a purpose in the world. So all the Roman soldiers, for instance, all they wanted to have were sons. If they had a daughter, there was no purpose for the daughter. So what they would do, they would tell their wives, even if they were away, they would write a letter home by saying, hey, when the baby's born, if it's a girl, just leave it on the mountainside and let her die of exposure. This is the culture that the early church lived in. And so the early Christians, they knew this. They knew this was the culture they lived in. And they knew that every child, whether it was a boy or girl, whether it had special needs, whether it was healthy or whatever, they were all made and born in the image of God. They were all loved by God. So what they would do in the middle of the night, under the cover of darkness, they would go on those mountainside and rescue those infant children. And they would take them into their homes. They would raise them as their own. They would love them. They would feed them. They would take care of them. And they would change the world in doing so. They were salt. They were light. They were influencing so many people. And so all these people in that culture would see this. And they go, what's up with that? And thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people would come and give their lives to Jesus. Because when they asked the Christians, what is this all about? They told them and shared with them the hope that Jesus gave them. And this is what Jesus meant when he said, you are the light, you are the salt of this world. And now here we are 2,000 years later. After Jesus teaches this, and billions of people have given their lives to Jesus. Hospitals, schools, orphanages, foreign aid, and other organizations have been started and created to help those in need, to be salt, to be light in this world. The world was flipped upside down by the followers of Jesus. And one church today exists because of them. This is something that boggles my mind. We would not be in this room. We wouldn't be able to rent from this school. We wouldn't be a church that's trying to serve this community if it wasn't for the people before us. And the people before them, and the people before them who followed Jesus and flipped this world upside down. And here we are now 2,000 years later, and Jesus' words are still no different now. He says that if you're going to follow me, your influence will be huge. But now maybe you're sitting here and you're wondering, just like the crowd wondered in that culture, what can I do to make a difference? And I think it helps if we don't start with thinking about ourselves as an individual first. But I think we should think about it as a collective whole. See, when it comes to being salt and light, it starts with we, not just me. It doesn't start with you. It doesn't start with me. It starts with we. And Jesus spoke to a people in this teaching, not a single person. You see, being salt and light is less about you and me becoming awesome and gaining influence. It's more about being a collective group focused on living out a mission, a vision, and a values of the collective organization or a group, or in our case, a church. See, together is better, and that's why we start with we, as in the whole. We have to be in on this together. We have to live out this mission and the values of God's kingdom together. We have to value what he does and not what the world does together. We together will be salt and light. It's not a burden that we carry as individuals. It's a mission we live out as a collective whole. But what happens if we start compromising our mission and start mixing in the values that the world has? When the world values greed and selfishness and complacency and pride, and we let that get into our faith, we become like diluted salt. It won't preserve. It won't save. Sure, we still have faith, but we love God, but we love other things more. It's like we have a faith, but it's not a faith that gives life because we let so many other things get in the way of it. And people will look at us and go, you know, I see that person, I know them, I know they're a Christian, I know they're a part of this church or whatever that may be, but really I don't see any difference from their life and mine. And sometimes that's true, but they're not seeing the salt, they're not experiencing the light. And when we do that, we lose our influence. In their new book called The Way Back, Phil Cook and Jonathan Bach explore this concept. They look at how the church used to be the most influential, most powerful force in this world for good, how we lost it, and they look at how we can get it back. In a recent interview I listened to, they posed the question asking how people who don't follow Jesus and aren't connected to a church, I asked them how they viewed the church. And the responses weren't very great if you're a follower of Jesus. We're viewed as judgmental, viewed as hateful. They're not experiencing salt, not experiencing light. I'm not saying that's about one church, but the general conception, the perception of church is that, you know what, they're not really different than anybody else. And it's not that churches aren't doing really good things. They really are. There's tons of churches doing great things, but too often what we're doing is we're diluting the salt, we're covering up the light, and we're missing the point. As an example, Phil and Jonathan brought up an example in their book of how the church could get back our influence. They used the example of foster care. There are 450,000 children in foster care in our country right now. Essentially, these are children who don't have parents. They're being bounced around to different houses. They've been kind of abandoned in a lot of ways. They really don't know what's going to happen in their lives. In fact, you look at stats, people, kids who grow up in foster care, they struggle to really grow up and live a life that's impactful and a life worth leading because they struggle with abandonment and loneliness. They're not having parental influence that they should have. That's not true for all the kids in foster care, but it's true for a lot of them. There's 450,000 kids in foster care. There are currently 300,000 churches in America. Makes you wonder, why do we need a new church? And the average size of those churches are about 100 people. So just about what we have coming to one church each week. Do the math there. That's less than 2 kids per church. If one couple per church and the other 98 on average would take care of 2 kids, we could eradicate foster care in our country. Now that seems really simple, and I'm not trying to make it sound simple. I know it's a huge endeavor. I know it would take a lot to get there, but the global church is more resourced than ever before. But we don't have the influence like we used to have. That's why we have to carry out this mission together. It can't just fall on our shoulders as individuals. It has to be something we do together as a church. That's why we should be one. We started one church with the mission to work as one to help people follow Jesus. And we do that much better together than we do that separately. It just can't be me. It just can't be you. It has to be we. That's why in 2 weeks we're having Love CV Day. And today on April 29th, what we're doing is we're not meeting here as a church. We're going to meet out there as a church. What we're going to do is we're going to meet in the parking lot. We're going to get together at 10 o'clock. We're going to pray. And then we're going to disperse and go serve in different areas in our community. We're partnering with different organizations to do some spring cleanup, to do some cleaning for other organizations that are serving our community. And this is a great way for us as a church to partner with our community to be salt and light. Here's what we have so far. We'll be serving with the Chartiers Valley Service Center in Carnegie. We'll be cleaning their facility that helps serve the people in need in our community. They don't have people to do that, so we can jump in and help them. Now this one is not a kid-friendly one. We need adults for that one, but the other ones we have, if you have little kids, these are the next ones that you should be coming to or being a part of. We'll be partnering with the Bridgeville Fire Department. We've partnered with them a couple times over the past year already. It's been great to connect with them, but what we're doing is we're going to meet there. We're going to do some spring cleaning around their facility, doing some stuff inside their facility, but it helps them because they do a bunch of events out of their facility for the community. In fact, the first time we connected with them was last year around Halloween, where they had the Halloween parade, and they had a big festival taking place at their bay where their trucks are kept. And we had pictures and games, and we partnered with them. It was a great time. We'll be partnering with them for this event as well. And then we're also going to partner with the Collier Municipal Building. We've also partnered with Collier as a church a couple times over the past year. We have a moms group that meets there on Wednesday mornings a couple times a month. We've partnered with them with different events as well. And we're going to go there, and we're going to do some cleanup for them as well. Because spring is kind of here. It's gorgeous today. It's going to be cold tomorrow, which is horrible. But it's here pretty much, and we're going to go and just help them in that. We're going to go. We're going to serve as a church. We're going to love as a church. And we're going to be salt and light as we partner with people in our community. We're excited about that. So we encourage you, sign up for that. Come be a part of that with us. We need you to sign up so we can know the numbers that we have, so we can place people in different ones. And if you have a specific site that you want to serve in, you have the opportunity to sign up for that specific serving site before we get there. But be a part of that. Come love Chartiers Valley with us together as a church, because together is better. And then the following week, we also have this really cool event that we're doing called One Church at Scott Park. Long story short, essentially, this building is booked that day. Like, there's nothing we can do. We can't rent it. There's other stuff going on, which is fine. But we're not going to not meet together. So what we're going to do is we're going to have One Church at Scott Park, which is just down the road from here. And we rented out a couple of pavilions. We're going to have a short service at 11 o'clock. But what we're going to do is we're going to have some food. We're going to have some games for kids. And we're just going to hang out together. And it's a great chance for us as a church to invite some people with us and just be a community together as we're hanging out in a local park. It's going to be awesome, and we encourage you to be a part of that. Essentially, what we're doing is this. We'll have carnival games for the kids. We'll provide the main food, but we're asking you to do two things and come that day. One is bring a side dish, because that's what church is supposed to do, potluck style, right? We'll bring it. We'll share some food together. It's going to be awesome. So bring a side dish or a dessert. And then here's also what I want you to do. Bring some people with you. Bring some friends. Bring a neighbor. Bring a family member, whoever that may be. Someone that maybe doesn't have a church connection. Invite them to come along with you and say, hey, I'm a part of this church. I'm checking out myself. I'm still not sure, but so far they're not too weird, and I like them. And so why don't you come with me to Scott Park? There's going to be lots of fun for kids. We're going to have some food. It's going to be a good time. We'll have a short service at 11 o'clock. Then we'll hang out, have some food together, and have a good day. That's happening too. That's a chance for us to hang out together and be salt and light to the people around us. This is an opportunity for us to be salt and light together. It starts with we. And then when we start with we can remember that the we encourages the me. I know that's not proper English. That's okay. When we think of the collective whole, it encourages us as an individual. When we know that we're in this together, it encourages me and you to go live our lives out in our own everyday circumstances. See, something I know about all of us is we all have different things that we do. We have different families. We have different neighbors. We live in different neighborhoods. We have different jobs. We have different friends, and we have different places that we hang out. You can and should be salt and light in those situations, in those places and with the people around you. And that sounds like an intimidating thing. Is how can you as an individual be salt and light in your workplace or in the coffee shop you always go to or in your neighborhood when you don't talk to your neighbors that much to begin with? How can you do that? But think about this. How much would it help knowing that you're not the only one living this out the other 6 days of the week? I received a message last Sunday. After we gathered as one church, we got home and relaxed, and I get this message from a person I've never met in my entire life. But she experienced a situation with someone who's a part of one church that is changing her and her husband's life, and I want to share that with you. We have a guy who's a part of this church. His name's Ben. He's the one up here who usually slaps the bass up here. He's a good dude. He is a friend of mine from Wisconsin, moved here to help be a part of this church. And Ben's a nurse. And he works at a local hospital here in Pittsburgh, and Ben had this experience with this couple. And I changed their names to kind of give them some privacy in this, but this is their story. She writes me, she goes, my husband Joe recently had surgery and spent a few days at Presbyterian Hospital. An amazing young man in RN really connected with Joe. He invited us to visit one church, and for the first time in many years, my husband responded positively. The saying goes, God places people in your life for a reason, and Ben was that special person. I believe sometime in the future we'll attend a service. We live in Westmoreland County, and I love my church, but my husband has never attended with me. Joe's first wife, who he was happily married to for 32 years, passed away at Presbyterian Hospital at the age of 52. They were very involved with their church, but since her death, Joe never returned. We have a wonderful relationship, and I knew Joe and his former wife all my life. And it was upsetting to me at first, but I learned to let it go and give it to God as I attended alone. I was so thrilled to hear Joe speak of this awesome guy he met. It made him feel so comfortable as he was laying in the place where he spent 3 months with his wife, who never returned home. I was dropping off some items in Joe's hospital room after I left him in the pre-op, and I heard someone say, "See you, Ben?" So I turned around and asked if he was the Ben that my husband spoke of. We hugged, and he walked with me back to Joe's room and spent an extra hour connecting with me. Who does that? He just put in a 12-hour shift and was going home to sleep. So I just wanted to extend my heartfelt compliment to one of your people at your church. I'm sure you already know what a great person he is, but it's his good words and good deeds that are worth sharing. God bless your journey. We will be sure to visit someday. Now, when I read this story, my focus isn't like, oh, we have someone coming to one church. That's cool. But they live in Westmoreland County. That's a lot of bridges and rivers that get across. Pittsburgh, we don't do that, okay? It's far away. Hope they visit. Hope they enjoy it. But here's the thing that blew me away about this. First, I laughed when I read it. Because that's exactly who Ben is. Ben is the salt of the earth. He's a light in this world. But then as I thought about it even more, it encouraged me. Because as I'm going throughout my life, as I'm not here all the time at this school, obviously, we have our own lives outside of here on Sunday mornings, I'm encouraged to be salt and light. Because I know Ben's doing the same thing. And the hope is if Ben's doing that, and I'm doing that, and you're doing that, and we're all doing that, we know that we are influencing this community in ways that's going to flip it upside down. This is what Jesus meant when he said that we are going to be salt, that we are going to be light. We live lives that others cannot and should not stay the same with. And that's why the one thing that I want to encourage us with to walk away from is this today. A life following Jesus changes the lives of others. They should see the way we live. They should see the way we serve. And they should go, what's up with that? It's then that we have opportunities to share with them and talk with them about Jesus and who he is and what he did and what the hope he gives to our lives because of his life, death, and resurrection. You see, faith in Jesus isn't something that we just savor. It's something that we share so it'll save others. And the more we realize this, the more we live our lives like this, the more it changes the lives in the world around us. We are salt and we are light. And I believe as we do this together, as it starts with we, Chartiers Valley, the South Hills of Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh as a whole, Pennsylvania, this country, and this world will never be the same. I believe it's going to flip things upside down when we live this way. That's a good thing. And we do that because of who Jesus is and what he did for us. Jesus flipped our lives upside down by coming and living and teaching, but most importantly, he laid down his life for us so that we can have new life. And we can be flipped upside down to be right side up. And we have this opportunity to join Jesus to be salt and light in this world. After this next song, we're going to worship and remember that through communion. And if you're 5 weeks now, a veteran here at One Church, you know what we're doing. You know what we do? We pass out these buckets that have communion in. They're prepackaged. On the top layer, there's the bread. On the bottom, underneath the second layer, there's the juice. But we take communion together as one. So over this next song, reflect on this. Think about this. Think about what Jesus did for us and what he calls us to do as followers of Jesus. And then I'll come up afterwards. We'll lead us in communion together. Because of Jesus that we have this amazing opportunity to be salt and light in this world. And the lives of others will be changed because of it. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for this morning. God, we thank you for the volunteers, the band, the people in the kids' room who are here to serve and love and be salt and light. And God, we thank you for the people in this room as we gather to explore more of who you are and what you called your followers to do. And God, whether we're here and we're following you, or maybe we're here, we're struggling, we're asking questions, trying to figure out what you're all about. God, we thank you for this teaching because it shows us that a life following you to change the lives of others because of the way we live. God, you changed our lives, so help us to live lives that changes others in your name. That you know we pray.